Kennedy, I want to start with something that I think you and I agree on, and that is that Big Pharma has too much power in Washington. You've said that President Trump asked you to, quote, clean up corruption and conflicts. Sounds great. You've said that you will, quote, slam shut the revolving door between government agencies and the companies they regulate. I
want to stop that for a second. So when you think about what she's saying, look at how Avril Haines leaves the Obama administration, where she was working at the CIA, where she was I think she was the deputy director of NSA. And then she goes to work for Palantir. I mean, who makes this stuff up? She goes to work for West Exec Med. So I would ask Elizabeth Warren, did you vote? Because I'm sure, did she vote for Avril Haines? Maybe she didn't. Some senators didn't. But if you're upset about the revolving door, and I think she is, like I think she's sincere, did you vote for Avril Haines?
So sounds great. So here's an easy question. Will you commit that when you leave this job, you will not accept compensation from a drug company, a medical device company, a hospital system, or a health insurer for at least 4 years, including as a lobbyist or a board member?
Can you just repeat the last part of the question? Can I commit?
You're not going to take money from drug companies in any way, shape, or form.
Who? Me?
Yes, you.
Oh. Yeah, I'm happy to commit to that.
Okay, good. That's what I figured. I said it's an easy question to start with. And I think you're right.
All right, so they agree. He's not going to leave government and work for Big Pharma. And contrast that with Howard Dean, who became a huge flack for, it was making $1 million a year before he died, working for lobbying for Big Pharma. By the way, I'm looking this up. Elizabeth Warren. So, I mean, folks, I don't know what you do with this. She did, in fact, vote to confirm Avril Haines. And I do think that's remarkable hypocrisy. She says she's against the revolving door, and I believe her. She says it's not right for government officials to go work for the very companies that they regulated when they leave office. That's very problematic. And you can see why. Because if you're supposed to regulate a company, but you think you'll get a great job offer from them, if you don't regulate them aggressively, then you won't regulate them aggressively. And if you're the company, you're like, yeah, we'll take on this hack, because it's certainly worth it to let everybody know that if you treat us with kid gloves when you're in government, we're going to make sure you get a nice silver lining when you come out. So if Elizabeth Warren is that upset, and I think she is, I really do, I'm not doubting it, how much hypocrisy then is there in her vote to confirm Avril Haines, who leaves government where she's in the defense side and then immediately goes to work for defense contractors? It's horrible. It's awful. We've got to move to a different party.
On this,
I don't think any of them want to give me money, by the way.
Let's keep going.
And he's right. He says they don't want to give me money. And he's right. They wouldn't. But that's to his credit. See, this is the Greenwald argument, which I share. The problem is he's a kook. I mean, the anti-vax stuff, he's just wrong about.
Because every American has the right to know that every decision you make as our number one health officer is to help them and not to make money for yourself in the future. So I want to talk more about money. I'm looking at your paperwork right now. In the past 2 years, you've raked in $2.5 million from a law firm called Wisner Baum. You go online, you do commercials to encourage people to...
By the way, when I was listening to this, I was like, does Warren... Now, I just pointed out the hypocrisy in her vote for Avril Haines for Director of National Intelligence, given her concern about the revolving door from government to big business and back. But I did want to find out when she criticizes RFK Jr. for getting legal fees, very significant fees for suing or finding clients who will sue Big Pharma. Is she taking money from Big Pharma? Does she trade stock? Right? Because that's a big issue that AOC has pointed out, and I think rightly so, that Democrats are trading stock based on insider information. And to Warren's credit, she's really fought against that. Now, I don't know, maybe she does still trade. I couldn't find evidence that she does, but I have found that she's really pushing the AOC bill to ban insider trading by Congress. And I praise her for that. That's good. She is walking the walk when it comes to that issue.
Wisnerbaum to join lawsuits against vaccine makers. And for everyone who signs up, you personally get paid. And if they win their case, you get 10% of what they win. So if you bring in somebody who gets $10 million, you walk away with $1 million. Now, you just said that you want the American people to know you can't be bought. Your decisions won't depend on how much money you could make in the future. You won't go to work for a drug company after you leave HHS. But you and I both know there's another way to make money. So, Mr. Kennedy, will you also agree that you won't take any compensation from any lawsuits against drug companies while you are secretary and for 4 years afterwards?
All right, so her question, I probably am very clear. She asked it very clearly. She is a lawyer. She said, you're not going to work for drug companies. Will you agree not to sue drug companies or refer patients to drug companies if you leave government? And when I first read the question, I thought, okay, it sort of was a gotcha. Like, you made it easy for him. You said you're not going to take money from Big Pharma. Now I'm going to make it a little harder and ask you if you'll sue Big Pharma and ask you to say you won't. I don't see why he should say that. What's the problem? Why is it I get it's a problem if you're supposed to regulate Big Pharma and then you leave and you work for them. That seems like a real problem because you'll get rewarded for treating them with kid gloves. You have an incentive to go easy on the people you're regulating. But what's the reason he shouldn't sue the Big Pharma? I don't have a problem. Honestly, I'm really trying to understand. It's not the same thing. If the companies that he regulates, that he's overseeing, hurt somebody, why shouldn't he sue them? That doesn't make sense to me. He's not taking money from them if he sues them. Well, he is taking money in a way, but they're not rewarding him. They're not paying him. So I don't see the problem there I don't see why he should agree not to sue drug companies.
Well, I'll certainly commit to that while I'm secretary. But I do want to clarify something because you're making me sound like a shill. I put together that case. I did the Science Day presentation to the judge on that case to get it into court.
Mr. Kennedy, hearing. Mr. Kennedy, it's just a really simple question.
So this is where I can't stand it. She says to him, you get 10% for referring some client. It's like, it's just a finder's fee. That's the way she characterized it. He said, that's not really true. I actually did real work on the case where I did get the 2.5 million or whatever. Maybe it was more than one, but maybe there was, I would assume, a class action of some sort. But he's saying, no, it wasn't just like I found a few people. I actually did legal work. And I'm sure he did. He is as Shade puts it, an ambulance chaser. He's done that, but he's also done a lot of environmental work too. His record as a lawyer is somewhat impressive. So I thought this line of questioning just didn't make sense to me. And I think Warren went off the rails there because she's just trying to draw a false equivalency. And this is how Democrats lose. Focus on the vaccine positions he's taken. And even there, he said, hey, I'm not going to stand in the way. I'm not going to stand in the way. I think at some point, if you express views that really are clearly, and I understand there's so much question about vaccines, right? People, Jimmy Dore has done a lot to poison the well against vaccines. Jimmy Dore's done a lot of great work. Don't get me wrong. And there certainly have been some issues with those COVID vaccines. My understanding is they absolutely saved lives, saved millions of lives. We had the highest, RFK Jr. said this, we had the highest death rate from COVID of any country in the developed world. That probably is true. There's some Eastern European countries that had very high COVID death rates that also had relatively low rates of vaccination. But we also had a low rate of vaccination. So it's not clear that one caused the other, but there's correlation. You can point to areas, you can point to correlations between certain low countries with low vaccine rates and high death rates from COVID. But even if you say with COVID, yeah, the vaccines weren't as effective as they were touted to be, and they weren't, they still were effective. They still saved some lives, a lot of lives. And, there's been a lot of search to find victims from those vaccinations, and I think they've been largely, but not completely, fruitless. So I think at some point, especially for a position that requires you to oversee health and human services, if you're going to be that skeptical as RFK Jr. has been of late of traditional Western medicine, the whole idea that we go into a lab and we put bacteria under a microscope and we see how we can kill that bacteria. We put a virus under a microscope and we see if there's any way to kill. The viruses are tough to kill. That type of science has proven to be an incredible boon for humanity. And if RFK Jr. doesn't get that, I don't think he should be confirmed as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. All that said, I understand a lot of people believe what he says about vaccines. And I'll make this final point. I don't want to argue with you, but why do people believe stuff when really the evidence doesn't support it? What's the reason for that? And it's so important that we understand this. It's because there's so much inequality, because there's so much exploitation of the poor and the working class by the tiny minority at the top. Economic inequality feeds conspiracy theories. If you don't want poor, struggling, and working people to believe conspiracy theories, then you have to fight to tax the rich and guarantee everyone a decent life. And Democrats, like Republicans, have failed to do that. We need a different direction. I'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend.